Welcome into Crossing Broadcast. What is this on a Monday? Crossing Broadcast in this economy? The last time we did the show, I think Craig said was like 3 weeks ago. My oh my, does time fly when you're off having fun. I'm happy to be back on a Monday. We're working through a lot of different things here. Many things going on in the background. Reed DeFord already checks in over on YouTube and says, Crossing Broad is back like it never left. Listen, my friends. This morning, Josh White checks in. Oh, yes, we're back. Listen, I've been doing the Russ Joy Show every Tuesday and Friday morning, 8:30 a.m. over on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I would highly encourage people to go over and subscribe to that channel, if for no other reason. Then I have been very consistent, except for there was 1 week that I was in New York doing meetings after Crossing Broad got sold off along with other assets of XL Media to Sport Radar. Other than that week, I've been very consistent about doing the show on Tuesday and Friday. So if you enjoy whatever the hell this Monday episode of Crossing Broadcast is, go over and subscribe. We are very close, by the way. I think we're 21 subscribers away in the drive to 500 subscribers. That when we hit 500 subscribers over on the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel, I will be giving away the jersey of your choice to one random subscriber to the channel. So I've given myself 7 days, a 7-day window to do a little bit more promotion. But when we get to 500 subscribers, jersey of your choice worth up to $175 if you're the randomly selected subscriber. So if you haven't done so, go subscribe there. It's all rainbows and smiles and everything's great. But we're back here on a Monday because it just seemed inconceivable to me that we would go without doing anything fun on Crossing Broadcast after the Eagles have just turned their season around. I think it's listen, I said on my show on Friday, I'm not ready yet to apologize in full to Nick Sirianni. I'm not all the way to saying that Nick Sirianni is a very good head football coach, but I was starting to warm up to the notion that he might not have been the absolute dog shit mess of a human being that he certainly appeared to be at the end of last season. And then through the first 4 weeks of this season where the Eagles were 2-2, they went into a bye week. I was crossing my fingies and my tootsie toes that they were going to make a change at head coach. It didn't happen. We all knew Bill Belichick was, out with I was going to say the binoculars. Bill Belichick strikes me more as like one of the guys with like the long, what the hell's the telescope thing or Craig will figure it out. It's the thing where, the hook, like Captain Hook would use to like look out at the distance. It kind of looks like, it's not a telescope. You look at it out in the distance. It's like kind of expandable. Somebody knows what it is, okay? But whatever that thing is called, That's what I think Bill Belichick has, right? That's probably what he used during Spygate. And he was monitoring the Eagles situation. Then he had another one over here. We could monitor the Eagles situation. And if he had a lazy eye, he'd be able to monitor them both at the same time, one north, one south. But we figured that, Bill Belichick might be really excited about taking over the Philadelphia Eagles. Perhaps he would even have some potential coaches in mind. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Around the bye week. And then we had heard from Rob Motti on this here show on a Thursday episode with myself and Kevin Kincaid that, no, Belichick's never going to be interested in taking over midseason. Okay, fine. So we kind of gave that one up, and we said, if the gods be good, we will hope that the Eagles' talent will just override and win in spite of the head coach. And a lot of interesting things have happened now. The Eagles have won 8 straight games. And while I haven't been saying it on this show, I have been saying it on mine now for a few weeks. There are things that you look for in a good team, and there are things that you need to have happen for you to become a great team. And this Philadelphia Eagles team, if they're not fully great yet, they're pretty damn close. And I said that going into the last few games, tough stretch of Eagles football coming up, tough stretch of games. You would even look at, now, after Bryce Young has kind of come back and sort of looked more like the guy Carolina thought they drafted, the cupcake game that happens next week against Carolina, excuse me, that game might not be as much of a cupcake as you thought it was, but it's still a game that you should absolutely win. But I looked at this a few weeks ago, and again, I think it was 3 weeks ago was the last time we did the show. They might have been coming off the win over the Commanders. They might have been coming off the win against the Cowboys. I don't remember which one it was. And again, if somehow the only time that you and I interact is on this show, boy, we have a lot to catch up on. I'm assuming that's not the case with many of you. But just in case, we looked at saying, hey, the Commanders, at that point, Commanders looked like a legit team. Eagles kind of stomped them out at home. It was great. Eagles go on the road. They take on the Rams. They absolutely obliterate the Rams by double digits in a game that I don't think was even as close as the final score indicated. And then it all came down to yesterday because Sunday's game against the Ravens was by all accounts, and for all intents and purposes, the closest thing to a Super Bowl preview as you could possibly get over the last few weeks of the season, at least on the Eagles' schedule. And they didn't just go down to Baltimore and win. They won decisively. Had it not been for a final touchdown drive that was essentially in garbage time, which, by the way, was a nice catch by a guy who I thought was injured on the Ravens offense. Had it not been for that touchdown, had it not been for that final drive, your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles would have held Baltimore to 12 points on the day. I've been saying for weeks now, the most impressive thing to me, bar none, other than the incredible Saquon Barkley, who, he gets a little bit of consideration for league MVP. I know, crazy. Nuts. If we just put that off to the side. The thing that has been the most impressive, it is this Eagles defense. And it's the Eagles defense on a whole bunch of different levels. We need to be fair. The Eagles defense as a whole has been very impressive. But there are just so many things that, again, separate a good team from a great team. What separates good from great on a talent level, right? Do you have big-name players who are game breakers? Well, the Eagles sort of did defensively. Kind of. They had Darius. Maybe we're ready to give him back big play Slay on the outside, although we all know that his best years are behind him. They brought back CJ who played a vital role on this Eagles team a couple of years ago, and then went off to Detroit and has since come back and has provided a swagger to this defense that was really missing last year. But he's not necessarily a big-name guy, maybe not the game breaker that you're thinking of, from back in the Brian Dawkins days. He maybe isn't as impactful or as highly regarded as Malcolm Jenkins was when the Eagles went off and won a Super Bowl. Maybe not that. And then you look at the defensive line and you say, okay, do you have your equivalent of a Trent Cole? Well, you sort of did in Brandon Graham. But now Brandon Graham is gone. Brandon Graham tore his triceps 2 weeks ago. Didn't play in this game on Sunday, which apparently didn't affect the pass rush in the least, which we'll get to in a second. The Eagles don't have dominant forces that they've brought in through free agency that are carrying this defense. The guys that they've brought in have played big roles. Slay is still valuable when he's able to suit up. CJ still very valuable. Brandon Graham was valuable, although he was a draft pick, right? He wasn't a free agent acquisition. You look at the rest of the team and you go, okay, good to great. What does that look like? Are young guys being cultivated to take over this defense long term? Are there values being instilled in those players between the vets on the team and the defensive coordinator that set you up for significant success down the road? And the answer right now is a resounding, oh, hell yeah. Give me a hell yeah. What? Yes, they look incredible. Quinyon Mitchell is maybe the most impactful cornerback as a rookie that we have seen in years, certainly on this team, but just league-wide. Impactful. Nobody wants to throw his way. The success rate against Quinyon Mitchell is practically non-existent. And then you look at what happened on Sunday. Cooper DeJean, who has been marvelous this year, has lived up to being a high draft pick. Again, an anomaly, right? Young corners aren't supposed to be this good. They're not supposed to be contributors at this level as rookies. Cooper DeJean, in that Ravens game, lays out Derrick Henry, big, massive beast of a human being. Derrick Henry lays him out in a way that maybe isn't Sheldon Brown on Reggie Bush, because that was speed, man. That was speed. That was ball over, and like Sheldon Brown just kept going. This, when I thought about it, this was Brian Dawkins on Algie Crumpler in the NFC Championship game. That's what that hit was. He stuck Derrick Henry, stopped the momentum, and double leg sweeped him. I mean, that was incredible. That's I don't know about this as the celebration. I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is the one that I want to go for from Cooper DeJean, but that play is emblematic of what this season has been defensively for the Philadelphia Eagles. It's not a big free agent acquisition coming in and carrying the defense by himself. It's been the development they've been able to put together. And the fact that they've been able to watch these young players, the Cooper DeJeans, the Quinyon Mitchells, the Nakobe Deans, the Nolan Smiths, these guys all taking another step together. Jordan Davis's name won't be all over the stat sheet, right? Jordan Davis week in and week out isn't going to create a ton of sacks. He's an absolute stud at stopping the opposition in the run game. Derrick Henry has had MVP consideration thrown around his name for weeks. Derrick Henry had an okay game. Derrick Henry did not dominate. And a big reason for that is the incredible play up the middle of Jordan Davis. But then next to Davis, you have Milton Williams is in there, and then you have Jalen Carter, who's become just a freaking stud at tackle. Stud. Unreal. Collapses a pocket in ways we haven't seen in quite some time. All of a sudden, the interior defensive line is collapsing pockets on every quarterback, regardless of skill level, regardless of mobility. They are making quarterbacks' lives a living hell, which then throws off that quarterback's timing, which then makes him rush his reads, which then is advantageous when you have a secondary that features young corners like Mitchell and DeJean. And then you have other guys that can contribute. Reed Blankenship went out, but Reed has been very good. CJ has been very good. Ringo has been good. Like they've just pieced it together. And then this linebacking core that we came into this season saying, yo, the linebackers, this is a real point of contention with this team. It could be a real issue for this team. Linebackers have been great. Zach Bond, big plays again last night. You put him together. You have Nakobe Dean being able to stay healthy, taking another step. I mentioned before the role that Nolan Smith kind of plays on this defense. This unit is as impressive of a defense as I can remember. Like, there are shades of Jim Johnson's defense week in and week out. Again, they nearly held Baltimore to 12 points at home. And even still, even with the garbage time touchdown, you're talking about 19 points to a Ravens team that has legitimate firepower. And again, has a guy in the backfield who's been considered for MVP, plus the quarterback is the reigning league MVP. And the Eagles look like they didn't even break a sweat. Now, I want to take you back a little bit here. The Ravens can put up points. Last week against the Chargers, they put up 30. The week before in Pittsburgh, not a great game by them, 16 points. Home against the Bengals the week before, 35 points. Home against the Broncos the week before, 41. On the road at Cleveland the week before, 24. 41 on the road against Tampa Bay, 30 at home against the Commanders, 41 on the road in OT at Cincinnati, 35 points at home against Buffalo, 28 on the road against Dallas. This team can put up points, but they can't put up points against the Philadelphia Eagles defense. And in fairness, no one really seems to be able to. I don't think it's just limited to the Ravens. Teams are, listen, again, I've said for weeks on my show, this defense, their ability to hold the opposition to 24 or fewer points is almost unheard of. They are bananagrams good. Run it back. 19 on the road to Baltimore. 20 on the road to the Rams. 18 at home to the Commanders. 6 on the road to, but Dallas. 23 at home to Jacksonville. 17 on the road to Cincinnati. 3 on the road to the poor Giants. 16 at home against the Browns. Guys, this defense is absolutely legit. Now, you can certainly point to it and say, well, the Giants are garbage. The Bengals have had a down year, even though they were actually getting very hot at that time. The Jaguars are a dumpster fire. The Cowboys have been really bad. The Commanders, are they real, or are they just a team that beat up on worse teams? The Rams, that was the Rams at home, and Matthew Stafford was on a good tear. Listen, this defense is legit. And if at some point here, if there's anybody out there who still has legitimate concerns around whether or not this defense is legit, I got good news for you. They are legit. They are stepping up to the plate in each and every way. And when you have an Eagles team that is clicking on all cylinders defensively and is able to click on virtually all cylinders offensively with an absolute game breaker that we'll get to here in a second in Saquon Barkley, this team is like, boy, if their eyes aren't on New Orleans for the Super Bowl. They have to be looking that way. Craig pulls this up because he's an absolute stud. A stud muffin. I will tell you that the reason we haven't done the show for 3 weeks is because Craig was negotiating a new salary. He's up to $900,000 now. All right. He said, listen, the world's largest and greatest sports data company just acquired Crossing Broad. Let's get another $50K. And I said, Craig, that's probably fair. I don't give the approval, by the way. I have to go to Kinker. Kinker's the site manager. But I put in a good word for Craig, so we're back here on Monday. Anyway, Craig pulls this up. Here are where the Eagles defense ranks this season. Yards allowed, 33.93 on the entire season. That's 282.8 yards per game. That is first in the NFL. Passing yards allowed, 178 yards per game. That's third best in the NFL. Rushing yards allowed, 104.8 yards per game. That's seventh best in the NFL. Points allowed, 18.2 points per game allowed. That is fourth best in the NFL. And their 36 sacks on the season have them sixth best in the NFL. By virtually every metric, this defense is legit. Now, would it be beneficial to see this Eagles team take that next step? The way that you go from being a great defense to like an all-time defense is by winning the takeaways battle. And would it be nice to see an interception or a forced fumble or maybe 2 per game? Sure. When you get to the postseason, could this defense become a lot more driven by the moment? Could they capitalize on big moments a little bit more, be a little bit more opportunistic? Maybe. That's the thing that would set this team. Right now, the Eagles look like the best team in the NFC. You can keep your Detroit Lions bullshit propaganda to yourself. The Eagles look like the best team in the NFC. If that defense starts forcing more turnovers, then buenas noches, senor. We'll see you in New Orleans. Now, I did mention earlier, it's a little bit painful, or a lot of it painful, when you lose the guy who's been your best pass rusher, which has been Brandon Graham this season. We always say he's like 85 years old, and yet he's still able to get to the quarterback, right? The Eagles were fine. Eagles were totally fine. They managed to get contributions elsewhere. Zach Bond had half a sack. Nolan Smith had a sack. Jalen Carter, again, collapsing the pocket, had a sack. Jalen Hunt also contributed on the sack with Zach Bond. And it wasn't even that they got to Lamar Jackson for like 6 sacks. They got 3. It was the amount of times that he was pressured. It was the amount of times that he was going towards out of bounds and just sort of threw it away. There was one that I thought maybe was going to be an intentional grounding, or they almost looked like they were going to call it as a fumble. Kind of had like a shovel pass forward, but maybe it wasn't forward. Maybe it was just sideways. And they took a look at it. They made Lamar Jackson's life a living hell. Now, Jackson in the fourth quarter did have a couple of big pickups, a couple of big runs, where they were essentially playing prevent defense. They didn't want to give up the touchdown. They were fine with him taking the underneath. But on the whole, the defense has just been menacing. And the wildest part about it is, again, like I kind of tend to throw out the garbage time touchdown. The Eagles fall behind 9-0 in the first quarter, which we have to talk about here in a second. They fall behind 9-0 in the first quarter. And then what do? They hold the Ravens to 3 points the rest of the game, up until the garbage time touchdown. 3 points the rest of the way. Sure, could you look at it and say, Tucker had a rough game, missed multiple field goals? Problem. Sure. And if you want to count the garbage time touchdown as being your ones against their ones, I guess you can do that. But like for the most part, I take that out. So you give up 9 points in the first quarter and then 3 the rest of the way. That's elite. Now I'm concerned because the first quarter, those are your scripted plays. Those are the plays that, like, in theory, you've gone and watched tape and said, this is going to be at least 1 touchdown. Like, we can script out these first 15 or so plays. This is how we're going to score against this defense. And it seems like week in and week out, I don't know who's responsible for it. It might be Nick Sirianni. Maybe it's Kellen Moore. Maybe it's both. ¿Por qué no los dos? Something is a little bit un poco diferente between what happens in that first quarter on what are a lot of those scripted plays and what happens the rest of the game. Now, the cynic in me says,
well, the head coach, Nick Sirianni, is probably the one who goes into the film sessions and says, yep, guys, I know what's going to happen this week.
And he's the one who puts together the scripted plays, and they don't work. The execution's not there. And then what you see the rest of the game is Kellen Moore calling the plays, and you go, oh, Kellen Moore is a very good offensive coordinator. He now knows what he has available to him. That's when you start to see Saquon Barkley get more involved, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, who did the first 15? Who's responsible for those putrid first quarters? Now, we won't know. Maybe years from now we'll find out. But we know that Vic Fangio, defensively, has become an absolute menace when it comes to in-game adjustments. There might not be a better defensive coordinator right now in the NFL than Vic Fangio at assessing in real time what is working against his defense and what needs to be done to shut down the opposition. And almost embarrassingly so. Fangio, defensively, light years ahead of what they had last year in Sean Desai and then Matt Patricia. It's not even close. What he was able to do against Lamar Jackson from a defensive coordinator perspective is all time. Now, I tracked down some numbers here because Vic Fangio has gone up against Lamar Jackson quite a few times in his career. This is the first time as the defensive coordinator of the Eagles. The first 12, let me look here. Hold on, this might not be the stat that I wanted. Hold on. Let's take a gander. No, that's not what I want. Let me see if I can find it. I had it before. I had Vic Fangio's. Here we go. I got it. So prior to last night, prior to last night's game against the Ravens, Vic Fangio had gone up against Lamar Jackson twice in his career. 2 times. In those 2 prior times, I believe both were last year with Miami, Lamar Jackson's team put up an average of 39.5 points per game, allowed a 69% completion percentage, gave up 350 total yards of offense per game, Lamar Jackson had thrown 6 touchdowns to 0 interceptions and had a passer rating of 139.8. That was prior to last night. If you don't think Vic Fangio went out of his way to scheme and to try to get one back on Lamar Jackson, you're out of your mind. Those numbers are wackadoo. All right, those are bad numbers previously. Vic Fangio and this Eagles defense, a very young and very hungry Eagles defense, a bunch of guys who are trying to prove that they are better than expectations, better than anyone could have expected, put in a masterclass from the defensive scheme that he implemented and had this defense execute. Masterclass. That's Fangio. And we touched a little bit there on why I'm a little bit hesitant still on Sirianni, because I feel like Sirianni might have, if Sirianni's the one who's picking those first 15 or so plays and he's the one scripting them out, and kind of looks like last year's offense. And it's just, I don't know, guys. I don't know. I will give him this, okay? If the Eagles go on and they win the Super Bowl, like we're gonna firmly remove Nick Sirianni from being considered on the hot seat for at least another year or two. I will simply point out, in as respectful of a way as I can, there is a lot of discourse today about, oh, the Eagles changed their coordinators in the offseason. You know, I was watching post-game live yesterday. They're talking about, we were talking about the bye week, that Nick Sirianni should be relieved of his duties, yada, yada, yada. And the bold strategy of Roseman and Lurie to keep the head coach in place and replace the coordinators. Okay, listen, we have to make a decision here. Either Sirianni's a really good coach who had very bad coordinators last year that he promoted from within, or, hear me out, perhaps the coordinators are kind of important, and now that he has a guy who's an absolute stud on the defensive side, and a guy who actually understands the concepts and understands the personnel and is seemingly very good at calling plays and adjusting on the fly, and Kellen Moore, maybe the coordinators have a really big hand in this, which doesn't mean that Nick Sirianni is not a good coach. But I have seen people today that are now going and trying to do revisionist history. Well, I never thought Nick Sirianni was really that bad. No, bullshit. Like, we all saw the same thing. We did. I'm not ready to, go back and, pray at the altar of Nick Sirianni. We're not going there yet. I will acknowledge things have gotten significantly better. How much of an impact he has on the actual in-game play calling versus what Kellen Moore has been able to execute, I don't know. It seems like beyond the first quarter, it's a very different offense being called. Okay, so that's just it. Okay? But the Eagles, 8 straight wins, looking like a dominant force. We're going to go out to the comments here. See if there's anything else we want to touch on there. And then I have one other thing I want to do. We're doing an in and out show today. We're doing a quickish, half-hour show, I told Craig. We're not doing 45 minutes. We're not doing an hour. Sometimes Russ talks a lot, and then the show goes long. We're not doing that today. We're not doing it, folks. We're not doing it. Not doing it. SB Jump liked the song at the very beginning of the show. Wait a second. Which Pokemon is that? That is... It's one of the Eevee evolutions. Oh, I would have known this like a year or two ago with Pokemon Go. It's not Vaporeon or Flareon. It's the... Is it Esperion? Or I don't know. Something like that. Anyway, we'll go back. Back out to the comments. Ford, in all caps. Ford is here. Thanks, Ford. Glad to see you. Glad to see you. Josh White says, if Sirianni brings it in the playoffs, I'm back on board. Connor also says, accountability is number one on Crossing Broad. That's right. That's exactly right. Ford asks, let's ask the group, who thinks the Eagles can win in Detroit? I do. I actually do. Anyone else? I do. I'm actually not as worried about home field advantage. At least from the idea of, I think the Eagles can win anywhere. Now, if the Eagles had to go play in Kansas City right now, would I feel great? No. I think Kansas City is just kind of on autopilot, though. And it doesn't hurt that it seems like, I know that the games aren't rigged, but the end of the Chiefs game against, was it the Raiders? That felt pretty bullshit. The missed snap, that kind of felt bullshit. A little bit. To not even be able to get an opportunity to kick a field goal. Felt a little bit bullshit, a little bit suspicious. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Josh White says, we could have a whole episode on Zach Bond. We got Ford saying Jalen Carter's a monster, which is true. D.D. Skinner says Bond is faux real. And also notes if we can get a freaking holding call. That's the big takeaway, at least when it comes to Jalen Carter and to Milton Williams to some extent. Man, oh man. Jalen Carter, I guarantee you, if we broke down any of the film, we could probably find 12 missed holding calls against Jalen Carter. He's that disruptive. I mean, like, there were multiple times where you watch the Ravens get like a few yard pickup and you see an offensive lineman with the hand in the face mask and the other like pulling on the jersey to try to hold Carter back. He was an absolute beast. Nylon Burning says, I love holding teams to lower scores, but we have to not ever leave it up to the judges. We need to maintain 2 or 3 possession leads so the refs can't steal them. I agree. I think yesterday you saw how big of a difference it makes when you have Devontae Smith available versus not. Like, A.J. Brown is still able to eat to some extent. And then ultimately the Eagles decided that like winning it on the ground was what really mattered. I think they only got on the field for like 3 minutes in the third quarter, the offense. Like, they couldn't get anything going that quarter. The Ravens were just driving. But like, you just look at it as a whole, Kellen Moore seems to be leaning more into the run game, which is totally fine. But when Devontae's not in there, it does feel like you're kind of missing that game breaker over the top. Like, we know that A.J. Brown has the ability to go downfield and beat somebody over the top, but they're able to double him so often because you're not as worried about Jahan Dotson. You're just not. Which is no offense to him. It's just, not the same. Ford says, defense wins championships. It must be said the Eagles have a very good defense. That is in fact correct. I don't know what this is, but Nylon says, looks like day drinking is too close to Ford. Massive keyboard. I don't know. Is Nylon accusing Ford of day drinking here? Oh, dear. Joe Papel says, still must get the number 1 seed to avoid an NFC championship in Detroit. I'm not as worried about it, Joe. I'm really not. I think this Eagles team can go on the road and win. I'm not afraid of Jared Goff. I refuse to be afraid of Jared Goff. Absolutely not. Let's see. I saw something else over here. Joe Papel says KC owns the officials. Reed DeFord says they can win in Detroit. It looks like Nylon and Ford are just going at it in the comments. We're going to let them go. Leonard Sports Interview says, you tell him. I don't know what I'm telling him, Leonard, but I will continue to tell them whatever it is they need to hear. All right. I think we're good. We're going to let those two just keep going back and forth. Joey B says, looking good, Russ. Happy belated Thanksgiving to you and your family, Joey B. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving as well. I broke this down over on my show on Friday, but I smoked a turkey this year in the big green egg. My wife did the roasting, the traditional roasting of the turkey, but the smoked turkey was like, that was the people's choice, which made me feel a little bit bad for my wife, but it was fantastic. It was a great smoked turkey. You can go check out that episode last week and go listen to that whole thing, that whole insanity in the Joy household. All right, last thing. Before we roll out, we're not going to talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. I refuse. I have a multi-show ban on the Philadelphia 76ers. So we're going to look at the other team in town that did something of note over the weekend, and that, of course, is the Philadelphia Flyers. And the reason that I bring it up, and then we're going to get out of here, the reason that I bring it up is because Matvei Michkov continues to prove that he has ice-cold Kool-Aid coursing through his veins. Matvei Michkov scores again in overtime. His third overtime winner of the season. You want to talk about clutch? Matvei Michkov looks like an absolute stud. Now, last weekend, not the one that just happened, the weekend before, Matvei Michkov squared off against Connor Bedard and the Chicago Blackhawks. And Bedard, after winning the Calder Trophy for Rookie of the Year last year, has had some growing pains this season. They've experimented with him on the wing. He had gone, I think he was up to 10 games without a goal. It might have extended further. I'm not keeping up with the Blackhawks right now. But Michkov looked better in that game. You fast forward a little bit, and you fast forward to how things ended against St. Louis. Travis Konechny lays out for the puck. It was that game. Was it that game? Now I'm even doubting myself. There was an OT winner where Travis Konechny lays out for the puck in overtime, flicks the puck along to Matvei Michkov, and Michkov goes forehand, backhand, dekes the goalie, and in an absolutely magisterial moment, deposits the puck in the back of the net. And all of a sudden, people who might have been a little bit skeptical of the young man were once again proven wrong. He has been an absolute stud in each and every way. I will tell you this. If there's one thing for you to feel good about if you're a Flyers fan, and we all know where I stand, you need elite talent. Winning and getting 2 points in the midst of what's supposed to be the second rebuilding season after you drafted in hockey purgatory last year. It's not exactly ideal to go out and get 2 points as often as the Flyers are right now. But I'll tell you what, I will gladly take the 2 points if it's because it came off the stick of Matvei Michkov. And then, yeah, it was the Blues game that he finished like that. I thought the most encouraging thing, let me see if I can find it here, because it was next level awesome, and it was the kind of thing that just makes you feel warm and fuzzy in your tum-tum. Ivan Fedotov goes to give the championship belt. They've got like the WWE championship belt that they give to the player of the game in the locker room after games, right? And Matvei Michkov gets it from Ivan Fedotov, right? So you go back like a year or so, and you're like, there's no way you're ever going to see Ivan Fedotov and Matvei Michkov in the same locker room. Except you did, because the Eagles were able to bring both of them over. So we go to this. This was post-game. Fedotov had the belt, and he goes over to the Russian sensation, to number 39, to Matvei Michkov. Michkov Mania, which you can get your shirts at shop.snowthegoalie.com. And here's how it unfolds. Here's how things play out between Fedotov and Michkov.
Such important 2 points, goalie, great job, guys, at Mitch, overtime goal. Good job, good win, but PK very, very good, but Cole is the best player. So. Yeah.
Great game, boys. Keep going.
All right, so here's why this, I mean, listen, if you put on your fan hat for a second, which I don't tend to, there's something so nice about Fedotov, who had been sent off to go do his year of Russian military service. He comes over. He has a rough end of last year where he never really gets to settle in. Doesn't look particularly good to start the year. Sam Ersson gets hurt. Fedotov gets into the mix. Fedotov's looked really good. They give the belt to Michkov, who wasn't supposed to be here for another 2 years, who came over here in his age 19 season, has looked like an absolute, like, franchise-changing player with a clutch gene that you just simply cannot teach. And Michkov gets the belt and says, it is a great game, but goalie was best player. And goes over and gives the belt to Alexei Kolosov, who people hated this offseason for not coming over and participating in training camp. And a lot of the things that came out at the end of last year about whether or not he was happy with how he was set up with the Phantoms, not getting playing time, yada, yada, yada. And now, because of Ersson's injury, Kolosov has gotten some starts. He's now gotten some wins. And all of a sudden, I don't think the Flyers are going to trade Sam Ersson, okay? We'll talk about this on Tuesday's episode of the Russ Joy Show. But I think that there's a possibility that the Flyers will move one of their goalies before the deadline, if for no other reason than they're this rebuilding team. They now have 3 guys who apparently can play at this level. And then they have Bjornsson off in the distance and Igor Zavragin playing in the KHL at 19 years of age, doing very well as well. And all of a sudden, the Philadelphia Flyers have become what kind of appears to be a goalie factory, which is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Okay? Wild. We're going to go over here real quick before we head out. Reed DeFord says, Matvei has locked up the Calder, and it's the beginning of December. He's very well on his way. Has to be. I think he leads all rookies in points and goals. 3 OT winners already. Insane. Dee Dee says she feels a little bit bad for Fedotov. I don't know why, but I think it was a nice thing. It was nice. There was somebody jokingly tweeted at me like, oh, should we have a conversation about how Fedotov didn't give the belt to Kolosov? I'm like, Jesus. And I know that they were joking, but I'm sure there's somebody out there who read way too far into that. Okay? Leonard Sports Interviews says, I've heard enough Flyers are going to win the Stanley Cup. Not this year, Leonard, but maybe. Maybe soon, but not this year. Joe Papel with a good takeaway. Mitch is English is getting better. Kolosov too. It seems like Michkov is taken to it better, but like remember, they don't have a full-time interpreter with those guys. They're trying to throw them into language acquisition versus language learning, which I could bore all of you with because as Ford knows, I used to be a teacher. I could go into that, but I'm not going to today. But we can all feel pretty good about the fact that they are working on it together. They're all learning together. I just like seeing the interactions between the players there. It feels kind of nice. Let's go over here. Ford says the Sixers are 4-14. The Flyers are 12-10. It should probably be the inverse, right? You would want the Sixers to be competing night in and night out and the Flyers to be tanking, and yet it's not what's happening. Josh White says, Zavragan looks like an absolute stud in the KHL. Will there even be room for him here? There will. He's 19. He won't come over for, I think, at least 2 more years. I think he's under contract for 2 more years in KHL. I think that they will not rush him now. And they'll rush him? They're not going to try to rush him. But it's nice that they have some organizational depth at the top. So maybe they don't even feel the onus to try to like rush him over here. Let's see. Oh, Didi says she feels bad for Fedotov because his pick was trumped. Silly, I know. No, I think it's fine. I think it's okay. I mean, I think that just about everybody, like when you have an overtime winner, that person gets the top star of the game, just typically, because it's a clutch moment. You know, I don't view it like that, but maybe. Josh White says, can't wait for them to announce Russ as the new Flyers interpreter. I recommended him because he was my favorite teacher. Thanks, Josh. Good guy, that Josh White. Good guy. All right. I think it's a good place to end. Now, I think we ended up going, this is 40 minutes now because we did like a 2-minute countdown, Craig. So it was 40 instead of 30. But it's still better than an hour. Now, I will remind people that if you have not done so already, you should probably go over and subscribe to the Russ Joy Show on YouTube. I'm going to put it up on the bottom there, Craig. See that? That's pretty good. But over on YouTube at the Russ Joy Show, when we get to 500 subscribers, which is very soon, I will randomly select somebody, a subscriber to the channel. That person wins a jersey of their choice worth up to $175. It could be an Eagles jersey, Sixers, Flyers, Phillies. It could be a non-Philly team. It could be like a Real Madrid jersey. I don't want to have to do it, but I do have some people who actively troll every show and say that they're going to ask for a Rangers jersey or a Giants jersey. I'm going to have to honor it. So go subscribe to the show. I'll be back there on Tuesday morning. I think I have a couple of meetings that might change Tuesday's show. So keep your eyes peeled to social media and to that YouTube channel. I'll make sure I set up the studio in advance. I think the tomorrow's show time is going to be pushed back a little bit. I'll have an update. I'll tweet about an update as well. But that'll happen. And then on Fridays, 8:30 a.m. over on the Russ Joy Show channel as well. Thursday, Kevin Kincaid is back here in the lead chair. I don't know who Kinker's going to have with him on Thursday. I have brought up to him that because my meeting schedule has changed in the way that it has with our acquisition, that I can't do the Thursday show as currently constructed, as currently constituted. I said, Kinker, we want to move the day, we want to move the time. And he said, we'll have the discussion around 2025. So I don't know who we'll have with him, but it won't be me on Thursday. But I hope you tune back into the Crossing Broad YouTube channel, X, and Facebook, and enjoy the show Thursday at noon. In the meantime, I will be off doing my show. We have Snow the Goalie coming this week. Press Row Show is back on Thursday night. And at some point, we're supposed to go into Wells Fargo Center to go record a regular episode of Snow the Goalie because I have a bunch of psychos on Twitter who almost daily are either DMing or tweeting asking if we are no longer doing regular Snow the Goalie. And I keep telling them, send intern Andrew a request for a refund. Oh, wait, it's free. Okay. Anyway, I'll talk to all of you later this week. Eagles get a big win. Matvei Michkov is an absolute stone-cold killer. And we love it all here on Crossing Broadcast. I will talk to all of you very soon.